What a great turnout. I'm Bob Mirasich. I'm the chairman and chief executive officer of International Market Centers, and just couldn't be more delighted than to be with all of you design professionals and aficionados of architecture. Not only do we have Frank Gehry here, and do we have a Frank and a Frank Gehry designed building as our neighbor next door, but we have the guy that had that dream and made it a reality in Larry Ruvo. The Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health, officially now the Cleveland Clinic Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health, opened in May of 2010. And on a personal note, my office for the first 6 or 7 years I was here overlooked the construction site and ultimately the finish of this spectacular building. And almost any time I would get up and look out the window, I would see people coming down, Bonneville or Alta, and going over there, and they would slow down. And then they go around the block, they come back, roll down the window, and take pictures. It just was remarkable. And then I'd look out there at times and I'd see Larry out there with George Bush or Bill Clinton or Andreas Bocelli, Michael Bublé, Tony Bennett, more and more and more. And anyway, the Ruvo Center is a national resource and world-class, and I emphasize world-class, for research, education, prevention, and treatment of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's disease, and ALS, and represents a collaboration between Larry, who lost his father Lou to Alzheimer's, and Mr. Gehry, a longtime champion of Huntington's disease research. Today, the 60,000 square foot Ruvo Center includes examination rooms, offices for healthcare professionals, most importantly researchers, a community auditorium, and it is headquarters for Keep Memory Alive Foundation, the Las Vegas Alzheimer's Association, and the Las Vegas Parkinson's Disease Association. The Gehry design captures the incredible research and credibility going on inside by some of the world's leading researchers. The reason it is world-class, I might add on a personal note, is because Larry Ruvo would have it no other way. He's a legendary businessman with his wife, Camille. They are extraordinary philanthropists. And I know no one with the resolve, tenacity, passion for being the best. And that is reflected in an iconic Frank Gehry Lou Ruvo Center. Larry, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
The Design Icon Award, as many of you know, is the centerpiece of programming at the Las Vegas Winter Market. It's a recognition of the importance of design in the home furnishings arena. The Design Icon Award honors designers who've made a significant and remarkable contribution to our industry throughout their career. We've had 10 design icons previously, but we've never honored an architect. What a start. Quite literally, Frank Gehry has revolutionized contemporary architecture. As part of the Design Icon presentations today, we have architects and students from the local universities. We have design professionals, and we have past recipients of the Icon Award. And we're proud to support the next generation of industry professionals and creative leaders to hopefully ensure that this talent pool is the future, and importantly, a passion of mine, defies the seeming pull of the furnishings industry into a commodity business. Frank Gehry is internationally acclaimed, a Pritzker Prize winner, and an architectural icon. He has created a portfolio of iconic buildings across the globe during a career that has spanned 8 decades. And he nudged me on the way here and said, I'm still working. And I said, how could we not have you still working? Gehry has redefined architecture in numerous cities all over the world and continues to shape contemporary commercial and residential interiors. He also was something I picked up, an early adopter of technology and a precursor in the utilization of digital technology. He was an early believer and practitioner that digital tools will be the vector in the quest to merge the process with the ultimate fabrication. He's now able to say, I'm able to transfer a sketch to a model to then a building. Some of his key projects are the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, Newer Zollhof in Dusseldorf, Kiot Day Complex in Venice, California, Olympic Fish Pavilion in Barcelona, Dancing House in Prague, Guggenheim in Bilbao, Spain, and of course, the Ruvo Center. I love a quote that I read in the Prestel book, simply titled Frank Gehry, and it said, Frank said, "When I was young, I sat with my grandfather and I read the Talmud. And the thing about the Talmud that's interesting is it's always questioning, why is it this? Why is it not this? Why is it this way? Why is it that way?" And so from the beginning, it built in me the kind of curiosity and willingness to ask, why? But better yet, why not? Frank Gehry. Thank you again, sir. So thank you for those of you that submitted questions. And so we'll jump right in, and then we'll bring Larry into the mix on how this all comes together and you make the magic that you've done for Las Vegas. You've seen some of the most noteworthy and dramatic evolutions, if not revolutions, in the architectural arena over the course of your career. Are there some remarkable things that stand out that were just, true disruptions?
Wow. Well, the computer, certainly. I think, Frank Lloyd Wright was a true disruption. Corbusier was a true disruption. I think in California, Schindler, probably Neutra. I mean, the names go on. The one that I flipped out about it, but is less known, is Mendelssohn, Eric Mendelssohn. And he did a tower in Berlin called the Einstein Tower. And it's so elegant, and it was very inexpensively built. And the way it's sited in the context of the historic buildings showed the way that to respect environments that you build in and become part of them, which a lot of people don't do. The developer architecture world doesn't respond to that kind of sensitivity very much. I mean, you can do it, but it's not a value to, they think, I suppose. I think it is a value. I think it absolutely does make the properties more valuable, but every city in the world kind of looks the same with these faceless buildings that look the same.
Well, I can't say that about you, sir, and your work.
I think that the difference. I mean, I'm not doing a lot of developer things, but I've done a few, and the difference is to pay attention to the context and the respect for what's gone before and the scale of it and how to incorporate it and take, it's like jujitsu. Jujitsu is based on when you use the opponent's force to your advantage. And I think, the city is kind of a force, and it has become an opponent in a way. You can use it to make a better place if you understand the energy of it and take the time to study that.
I know it wasn't something we had talked about, but I overheard you telling Larry about what's on the screen here. I believe this is what you did with or for Bernard Arnault from Louis Vuitton.
Which?
This is Berlin.
And is this in Berlin?
That's Bilbao.
No, on the right.
And that's Berlin. That's I just did that last year. It's for an orchestra that Daniel Barenboim and Edward Said created with Israeli musicians playing with musicians from Lebanon, Syria, all those Middle Eastern countries. And I spent time visiting the auditions with the musicians. And you see a young Israeli with a violin step up, and a young lady all in black with an oboe step up, and she's from Syria, and a Lebanese and viola, and an Egyptian cellist. These are kids. And they sit down together and they play beautifully. And they love playing together. I don't know what happens after they leave the room. I've been to an art, when we were developing a museum in in Abu Dhabi, we had sessions with curators from all those different countries trying to bring them together. And likewise, when they were together in the room talking about art and bringing art together, they were very communal. And when they left the room, it was a little bit dicey. But anyway, the musicians captured me. And while I was there, they said, would you do us the honor of designing our little hall? It's in a warehouse. It's not a building on the outside. It's very inexpensive. And so I was smitten, so I did it. And it seats 700. It opened last year, and it's filled every night almost. It's a big success. These kids come and play. They have regular programs. And some of the greatest musicians in the world have come to play there already with the kids. So, I think the model is that you can talk to each other through the arts better than you can through our languages and politics and all that stuff.
You've designed both commercial and residential projects. I even saw one where it was labeled Tract House. But in the context of that broad assortment of design, should architecture influence the product development and design of the interior furnishings, whether that's furniture, lighting, or art, or how do you think about that?
Well, if you can, you should. I think for me, I came from a poor background, and so I was a truck driver when I was a kid. And so I tend to these inexpensive projects, like Tract House is very interesting to me, to try and figure out a way to make that architecture. And some people have done it, in Germany they've done it, but in my lifetime, not a lot of stuff. More recently now, the younger people are starting to take note of that area of concern, which is heartening, I think. I think like the furniture thing was always, even when I was in the Army, I had to design field latrines for the generals. I wish I had a picture of it. It would really knock you out. And I did day rooms and service clubs and things like that. I think everything is up for grabs. And when I design a building, I don't like the idea of designing every single piece of it because, and that was the model of Frank Lloyd Wright and Mies van der Rohe and a lot of the predecessors, that you design everything. And it's sort of a straitjacket, I felt. I like the idea of designing a container and that people bring their stuff to it and make the container theirs with their work. And if somebody asks me to design a couch or something, I'll do it. So I got into, I forget how I got into cardboard furniture. I was making contour models for a train, and I made it out of cardboard, so it's layers of cardboard. And I was looking at that edge grain of cardboard, and I was doing a department store for Joseph Magnin, in which the various departments, because of the fashion world, was changing constantly. The cabinetry and things were becoming obsolete within months. They would just build something, then they'd have to change it. So I thought, well, why can't we make it out of cardboard, paper? And so I started out by, if you think of the engineering of it, if you fold cardboard, it makes it strong. And so that's the purest, from an engineering standpoint, you would think that's the purest direction. But it doesn't look so good. I was fascinated with this end grain, so I made a desk with all end grain, and because as we cut the pieces, the saw made the end very soft, and when you put it all together, it felt like and looked like corduroy. So then I started carving it away to see how thin I could get it, and it ended up with 2 inches. You could make a chair. And you could die cut the cardboard very quickly, because if you gave the die to the cardboard manufacturers, it was the last roller when the stuff came out, they would cut it for you for free. So you'd get this pile of stuff, take it apart, you get the shapes, and put it in a box and start gluing it. You make it that wide or that wide. and it comes out, and it's like corduroy. It feels very soft, nice to sit on.
I remember the chaise you
And
did.
you could cantilever it, so you could make it do S-curves and sit on it. And I even, because Bloomingdale's decided to sell it, and so I had an elephant stand on the table to show how strong it was.
When I was looking in the furniture section of your book, I came across a quote that, and I don't mean to surprise you with this stuff, but your quote was, "I have always had trouble with color being paint. We all have our purest, holier-than-thou areas, and mine has always been to use the natural material for color." And I thought about at least how I view your architectural projects, your furniture where you went from cardboard to bent wood to plastic, aluminum. And did that continue through your whole, I guess, design philosophy?
Yeah, I ran out of people to make it for, because I mean, if somebody wants to make stuff, give me a call. I think, you know, when you design a building, it takes a couple of years, right? So it's nice to have something that can happen in a few months, or for faster gratification. So we'll design anything.
So over the course of your career, and being evolutionary, revolutionary, the highest of standards, what's the most noteworthy constraints you've had? Was it with your designs? Was it material? Was it building codes? Was it budget?
No, constraints are very positive in the design world. They make you think harder. If they're not arbitrary, you know, if they're rational or reasonable, or I think it's good to have constraints. It's to work against them, figure them out, and problem solve. And the curiosity part that I talked about is a crucial factor, because you got to look at what if you did it this way, or what if you did it that way, or what are the options. And it's a constant search. And I always say, if I knew what I was going to do in advance, I wouldn't do it. And I think most creative people talk like that. I think I've read stuff from some of the greatest artists ever that say similar things, so it's not unusual. And I'm sure it's the same in science when you get to where you're challenging the unknown. You're looking into a very complicated world and asking a lot of questions. And I think it's, if you know in advance what you're going to do, then it probably ain't going to be worth as much.
Interesting. So you're 89, still working.
No, I'm 89, February 28th. Don't rush it.
What can I say? But you've got a body of work developed over 7 decades. I looked, you know, the tract house thing in your curiosity decades before other people's in areas that other architects didn't tread. Any regrets as you look back?
I try not to let myself worry about that. I suppose there are, but I don't want to wallow in the past. You know.
Good.
I try my best. I promise you, I try my best.
So Larry, you're sitting here. The idea had to come along in I'm guessing 2000, somewhere in that time frame. And what's the background?
But you got to understand that I had other offers to do work in Las Vegas. Sheldon Adelson offered me to rebuild the whole Venetian for him.
Really?
Yeah, and I turned him down. And Steve Wynn, and Kerkorian's guy came to me, and and that's a long story because my father had slot machines when I was a kid, so I have a checkered past. And so then in comes this guy from Vegas, and I thought, oh shit, another one of these. Okay, now you can talk.
That's not exactly how it happened. How it really happened is we were at a dinner the night before I was flying. I had this idea that I needed a celebrity architect because I believe living in Las Vegas, and my day job is selling wine and spirits to all of you when you leave this room. And I felt that if I opened up Bob and Larry's restaurant, or I put Wolfgang Puck in the same space, Wolfgang's going to do much better than Bob and Larry's restaurant. And my experience was that, like everybody in this room, I'd just like to know, could anybody raise their hand if they don't know a member of a family, friend, loved one that has Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, Huntington's, ALS? Does anybody not know somebody? No hands, not one.
There's one.
So out of this entire room, one person doesn't know somebody with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, ALS, or one of these terrible diseases. Camille and my wife and I decided that we were going to do something. The night that I wanted to have a celebrity architect, I thought it would immediately bring attention to the disease. The night before I went, exactly what Frank said, I happened to be at a dinner then with Terry Lanny, and I said, Frank, I'm going to go home. I got to fly to LA tomorrow to meet Frank Gehry. He said, why are you going to meet Frank Gehry? I said, I really wanted to build the center, this Alzheimer's. The night before I left, he said, well, good luck. He said no to Sheldon. He said no to Steve Wynn. He said no to us at City Center. And
he didn't know you very well.
Well, we went in, and I walked in to his office, and he didn't get up, and he said, I'm not doing a building in Las Vegas. At which time, with mixed company, I won't use the profanity, but I said, you're either the, and we started, and he said, sit down. I said, I got my 45 minutes. I want my 45 minutes. 3.5 hours, and I tell him my story. And one of the regrets that I ironically said when Frank and I were across the street is that he had a friend that he introduced me to. And I think more than any one individual, Milton Wexler made Frank Gehry not an architect, an artist and a sculptor. And Frank was telling me this story. We talked about the disease and why I felt an iconic building would bring together some of the greatest doctors in the world, and the world would know we're serious. He said, 2 weeks, let me think about it. 2 weeks later, I show back up with my wife, my secret weapon. We walk in. Frank, this is Camille. And he looks at her and he goes, did you ever make mud pies when you were young? She said, yeah. He says, you never did it with your enemies. I like your husband. I'm going to do the building. And that's how it started. That's how it started. Now, what happened, I told them that this was about putting together and changing the course of these diseases. It's the next tsunami for all of us. And I did lose my dad, my best friend. I was an only child. And I said, Frank, I want something that is so iconic. And he came to look at the site, and we were here, and we went to the high-rise building, one of the attorney friends of ours, and we were looking down at the site. We went back to Los Angeles, and he had a sketch on a plane. And I was telling him, I said, one of the things is when the building closes down, I don't want the janitors to come in. I want to open this up. And for those of you that'll be at the reception tonight, you'll see what Frank drew. On that plane, exactly what I asked him to do is exactly what we have. Now, several months later, he asked me to come back to his office. You couldn't make this story up. We walk in, and Megan was in there, and there's this platform with this, it's covered, I think it was a white sheet, maybe a silver sheet. Everything Frank likes is silver, so it could have been a silver sheet. And he says to me, so before I show you this, I want to ask you a question. What would you think? And as he's talking to me, he has a piece of paper. And as he's talking to me, he's taking this piece of paper. And he's tearing, as he's talking to me, what if I told you that I was going to build a building with about 555 pieces, no two alike, and I'm going to engineer it in Germany and India and Europe and Israel, and then I'm going to send it to China, and I'm going to build the pieces, and then I'm going to ship them to Las Vegas, and I'm going to build the biggest erector set, no two pieces alike, and then I'm going to put 199 windows in it, no two pieces alike, from Germany, and then I'm going to get 32,500, and he keeps tearing this up. And then he throws them down, and he goes, are any of those two pieces alike? I said, no. He said, well, what if I told you I'm going to put 32,500 pieces of stainless steel that all got to be evenly matched, and this has never been done before? And I said, when do we begin? And he unveiled the building, and as difficult and as complicated and as architectural students from around the world have come and looked at it and seen it. He did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Can I tell my version just quickly?
That's what I remember. So now he builds it, and I did exactly because of that man. We brought the Cleveland Clinic. We brought world-famous doctors. One is with us today, Dr. Jeffrey Cummings, and we have built the most unbelievable center. And this time, I like to tell people, because of Frank Gehry, what happens in Vegas benefits the rest of the world. Not what happens in Vegas stays in, it benefits the rest of the world, and we have 5 little Ruvo centers. We have it in Ohio, we have Weston, Florida. We're going to soon have one in Abu Dhabi at the Cleveland Clinic. So it's all about art and design, and everybody in this room knows how important art and design is. And all I did along the way is develop a great friendship. And without him, I wouldn't have Cleveland Clinic. I wouldn't have seen almost 27,000 patient visits last year. And I would not have the ability to bring to this city and now to the world some of the greatest doctors under one roof. And it was in great part because what he had not only taught me about building and design, it was a meeting we had with Milton Wexler. And the reason Frank really did this building is not that he and I connected. it's because for the previous decades, he had been involved with Milton Wexler, who said, help me find a cure for Huntington's disease. And with Frank at his side and a whole lot of Milton's friends and patients, he was a great doctor, he found the gene which essentially could cure the Huntington's disease. So Frank wanted me to be involved with Huntington's, and we are. We just had a doctor move to Las Vegas from Johns Hopkins that you met today, Dr. Zoltan Mari. So it all started with art and design. And I think if Frank went back and talked a little bit about Milton, Milton, I think, really allowed Frank to express himself. At least that's what Milton and Frank told me. Is that right?
I guess. Can I just say 1 minute to tell you that the way I work is not the way he explained it. There's no silver thing and a blanket, and I pull it off and drama. I don't do that. We came here, we met with some people. We met with Mayor Oscar Goodman, and we talked about what we were going to do. And Oscar said, we need to build like there's nothing else like it in Vegas. And I said, well, the problem is everything is here. You've built the Empire State Building, you built the... You know, it's pretty goddamn hard to build something that isn't here. And if you build something, they'll copy it anyway. So I said, so anyway, we talked like that about it. And then the building had to embody the energy of the man that was doing this, because it is about fundraising. It is about creating energy for bringing the effort that he has brought here to make this happen, which is a bloody miracle. And the building helped, but, you know, I'd say we're 50-50 partners. How's that? But we did tons of models and studies, and he saw all these intricate, we had a shelf full of them, of ideas that we were exploring. And finally, we picked on this one because we found out that we could build the curtain wall in China and get it done reasonable. And we found a contractor who could build the building. And it turned out, you know, it wasn't a runaway monster. It was built fairly reasonably.
On budget, on time.
Yeah. So.
And without Frank, in anyone's world, it's a complicated building. The few times we ran into problems with either officials, well, one was we needed to get a wind study, and of all the buildings in Las Vegas, we weren't even able to do the wind study here. We had to do it, I believe, in Florida or California. But every time we ran into a problem with one of the contractors, Frank was right there at my side, and it was always resolved thanks to him. So on budget, on time, on a building that difficult and complicated. And I remember...
And it hasn't been repeated yet.
It's because you and I haven't done our next building yet.
Oh, okay.
But when he was building it, and as you go into the building tonight, I was very worried about the acoustics. And he brought Yasuda Toyota, the gentleman that did the Disney Concert Hall. And we've had, as he said, from Tony Bennett to Michael Bublé to Andrea Bocelli, the room is acoustically, for that building, summed up best by our mutual friend Quincy Jones when he walked through on an afternoon. He was walking, and I had one of his Sinatra LA as my lady albums. He's walking through. He says, "Where am I? Am I in a sound studio? Where am I?" The acoustics are unbelievable. The building works. It's a great space for the doctors. The patients love it. And if I had to do it all over again, I would have done exactly what I did. It was the right move. Maybe my dad was looking down. I don't know how this happened. But Frank Gehry, he can say it's 50-50. It's 100% design, and without him, I wouldn't have the Cleveland Clinic. We wouldn't have what we have. And as we get inch closer to these disease, his fingerprints will be all over. Whatever we find a cure will be because of you. That's how I feel.
Well, I have been involved with the Huntington's chorea problem for many years because of this fabulous Milton Wexler, who's a great psychologist whose family was at risk for Huntington's, and finally, after his passing, his daughter has Huntington's. So it's been and we're very close to the family, so it's been something important. And I've always been interested in this meeting with the scientists, talking to them about it. And listening to their creative process in discovery, which is not unlike what all of us do when we design. It's a search, and it's a exploration of the unknown with the tools you have. They have mathematics and science and chemistry, and it seems very complex, and it is, but finally the solutions, when you get to them, they're very simple somehow, aren't they?
So we have in the audience quite a few students, and architectural students. I'm sure you're asked this quite often, but what advice would you give to architectural students in terms of how to be successful and have a great career?
Oh, God.
They wanted to know.
I know. Well, it's everybody's different, so everybody's career is going to be slightly different. And there are many different roles in the process of making buildings and design. And people tend to find the niches where they feel more comfortable, and I think that happens. Usually, it happens pretty naturally. And being a supportive member of a team is a very important part of the team. So it's not a lesser part of the team, because you need all the parts to make these things happen. I think the most important thing is to be yourself, to see who that is. And when I teach, I quite often, the first class, I'll ask people to write their signature. And then they put them on the table, and they're all aesthetically different. And so I say to them, you see how they're different, and that one's you, and this one's you, and this one's you, and that's how you're different, and that's your signature. So if you keep that in mind and let that be your mold your direction, that you're doing it and not looking over your shoulder to what somebody else thinks about it. I mean, it's no guarantee it's going to work out, but you'll have a lot of satisfaction doing it that way. And you will find yourself, and sooner or later somebody's going to like it. Michael Heiser, the artist, many years ago when I did the house with the chain link and the corrugated for myself years ago, I was visiting him out in the desert here north of Vegas, and he had just built one of those big earthwork things that he'd worked on. And it was midnight. We were walking out in the desert, beautiful moonlight. And he said to me, "You know, Frank, did you ever consider making your buildings out of more permanent materials?" He said, "You're working with wood and chain link and corrugated." He said, "If you make it out of more solid materials, the chances are sometime in the future somebody would like it."
Yes, that says it all.
And I think that's the... and it worked.
Larry, any closing thoughts? We're out of time, and I've got to thank you for making this possible with your friend. I remember a conversation we had a couple years ago about the building becoming the brand. And the essence of a brand is a promise. And you all made a great promise. Thank you.
And I want to thank Bob and this incredible facility because they've been a great neighbor. We've run out of space. He built a building too small. So we have a lot of our clerical staff and admin right here in this building, thanks to you. But stay tuned. Maybe we'll move out pretty soon if we can get phase 2 going. Well,
we keep it going. We'll be building another building.
Thank you.
It's a lot of fun. And I found out that Frank was friends and knew the architect, Jerdy's, of these buildings. And for those of you that were here in the early years, one of the local newspapers voted the building the most ugly building in the city.
This one, not that.
Yeah. So they didn't like it, Frank. I guess I'm
but they said worse things about the other one. So. Yeah.
So only one, before we leave, the only one funny, well, many funny stories, but at about 117-degree heat, some people were coming tourists, and they really thought, they called the 911, they really thought this building was melting. So, it's an attention getter.
So, Frank, I want to thank you deeply from the bottom of our hearts for blessing us with your presence and with your gem for all of our lifetime across the street. And we're proud to honor you with our 2018 Design Icon Award.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll send this your way. Larry, can we get a picture with